Human beings have always faced great risks. Throughout most of human history, mere survival was our paramount concern. For hundreds of thousands of years, life was short, stark, tough, and often brutal. For most people today, life does not involve the struggle for mere existence. Instead, our families, friends, school, work, pleasure, recreation, and health have moved to the center stage of our consciousness. But risk still exists. In recent years, a catastrophic tsunami caused death and destruction in the Indian Ocean. Hurricanes have ravaged the Caribbean and have destroyed New Orleans. Killer earthquakes have devastated Iran, Japan, Sumatra, Pakistan, Turkey, and Afghanistan. HIV, AIDS, resistant strains of tuberculosis, and the potential of an avian flu epidemic threaten millions of people worldwide. Unfortunately, the frequencies of disasters are increasing. Of course, the media also brings us news far faster than at any time in history. So we are more aware of disasters throughout the world. But it is more than a media effect. A number of forces have conspired to produce a large increase in natural disasters. During my lifetime, the world population has more than doubled. Global crowding increases stress and tension, brings different ethnic groups into close contact with the potential for conflict, war, and even genocide. The proximity of people to animals and people to each other also increases the probability of disease transmission and epidemics. Modern transportation increases human contact and shrinks the globe. Each day, millions of people cross international borders by automobile, trains, boats, and airplanes. Modern global air traffic means that a disease in Asia can spread quickly to other continents. The SARS epidemic, which fortunately was a public health success, quickly spread from China to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Canada. Contagious diseases know no borders, and international efforts at population control and disease prevention are urgently needed. Another global health and safety concern is global warming. For the last 3 decades, scientists and environmentalists have warned about the impact of global warming. Unfortunately, the planet is heating up more swiftly than predicted. Each year, new temperature records are set around the world. Huge icebergs are breaking off of both polar caps in Greenland. Each day, Greenland is ravaged by new forms of earthquakes as the glaciers melt. Each time I vacation in Alaska, virtually all the glaciers we visit have receded. Global warming can raise sea levels, inundating coasts, and disrupting the Gulf Stream and other ocean currents. For decades, global warming has been predicted to increase global storms. Various articles in the journal Science have shown hurricanes are dramatically increasing in strength. In 2006, we witnessed gigantic storms in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the South Pacific. A record number of tornadoes hit the United States in March of this year. Global warming is not a theory. It is a fact accepted by virtually all scientists. At the same time, studies of gases trapped in glaciers reveals the highest levels ever of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, the result of increased industrialization and burning of fossil fuels. Unfortunately, many people, businesses, and nations, including the government of the United States, are in denial about global warming and are not taking steps necessary to arrest its catastrophic consequences. People, institutions, and governments must act individually and collectively to slow or stop global warming. Smaller cars, carpooling, more efficient factories, using less fossil fuels are needed to prevent future disasters. At the same time, we need to be prepared to cope with natural disasters when they occur. Of course, not all such disasters are natural. Acts of terror have recently struck the United States, Spain, England, Colombia, Iraq, Israel, and the Sudan, India, Afghanistan, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Kashmir, and numerous other countries. Yet the primary goal of terrorism is not destruction. It is terror. Fear is the main product of terrorism, and fear can be even more destructive than deadly bombings, for it can cripple a society. As U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt once said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Fear can destroy democracy, cause citizens to support government repression, destroy commerce, create distrust, promote racism, harm the global economy, curtail travel, create paranoia, and incite violence. So while preparation for risks must be made, fear is a medicine that is often worse than the disease. During this program, we will discuss fear in some detail, along with its effect in improving public health and safety. Terrorism has occupied center stage in the world media and public consciousness, but only a small minority of violent deaths are due to terrorism. According to Clifton Coles in the Futurist magazine, violence kills over 1 million people each year, not to mention the physical injuries and emotional scars left by violence. Sadly, nearly half of all violent deaths in the year 2000 were suicides, while fewer than a third were homicides, and only a fifth were directly related to war, and even a smaller number were due to terrorism. According to the World Health Organization, the majority of violent deaths do not occur in the rich countries of the world. They are most likely to occur in low and middle-income countries. For years, the world has focused on violence against women, which is a serious problem. But men throughout the world are much more at risk for violence than women. More than 3/4 of all deaths from violence in the year 2000 were men, with males aged 15 to 29 the most likely to die. Similarly, of all accidental deaths on the job, 90% are men. We need to do far more to prevent the deaths of all people, including men. The fact that most violent deaths are suicides is alarming. Experts cite a number of forces that are causally related to suicide, including poverty, despair, poor education, lack of social service, repressive parenting, poor employment opportunities, lack of social services for high-risk youth, broken families, alcoholism, and the absence of psychological services throughout the world. What can be done about suicide? Solutions to the high worldwide suicide rate are complex and multifaceted. Suicide occurs when there's no hope, when the prospect of living is more frightening than the prospect of dying. Institutions of all types, including governments, companies, non-governmental organizations, schools, and colleges, need to reach out to the most desperate people in the world and give them hope for a better life. The list of other solutions is a long one. We need more psychological services and counseling in our communities schools, and companies. The World Health Organization suggests that controlling handguns and pesticides dramatically reduce suicides in many countries. We need to build strong families and strong economies that give people hope. Research shows that hope and future goals are keys to psychological health. People with interesting plans for the future do not commit suicide. We can all prevent suicide. First, take threats of suicide seriously. If someone threatens or attempts suicide, get them professional help. Ignoring suicidal persons is not helpful. Studies show that 75% of suicide victims gave clear warnings of their suicide in the weeks before it occurred. Don't underestimate the problems of other people. What may seem like a small problem to you may be overwhelming to another person. And remember, most suicide victims are not crazy or psychotic. They are actually normal people with more problems than they can handle alone. Most suicides are cries for help. Some are unintentional acts that are cries for attention that have gone too far. Stop and listen to a distressed friend or coworker, and don't dismiss their problem. Many people just need someone who will listen. If someone is actually suicidal, do not leave her or him alone, and take away poisons, guns, cars, or other means of committing suicide. The urge to commit suicide can pass. Help your friend or coworker through this troubled period. Do not promise them to keep their suicidal intentions a secret. Get them immediate help from a professional. There is only so much that you can do alone. We live in a scary world, and the media makes us aware of more threats than anyone will ever experience. Fear of failure or disease or death, of violence, is a natural human emotion. But how do we control responses to risk and fear? The fear response is a natural human emotion. It evolved in our ancestors to produce automatic reactions to danger. Fear helped us avoid dangerous animals and large predators. It prompted us to fear an overwhelming adversary. It emboldened us to fight to protect our loved ones and our family. Fear is often accompanied by surges of adrenaline, increased heart rate, sweating, and most interestingly, the flight or fight response. Fear short-circuits rational thinking, causing people to respond automatically. If fear responses were not automatic, they would not be very effective. Today, however, fear is often our enemy. News programs and crime dramas filled with assaults and murders cause us to experience fearful emotions on a daily basis that we would rarely have encountered in the days before movies and television. This may produce a chronic state of fear or stress. Add to that competition on the job, striving for success in school, battling rush hour traffic, and many people today are fearful and stressed out. Add constant warnings about cancer, heart disease, overweight, recession, and terrorism, and many people today feel overwhelmed by fear and stress. Fear is a two-edged sword. Because it is a powerful motivator, it is often used in health and safety campaigns. The fear of getting skin cancer, for example, is effective in getting people to use sunscreen and wear protective clothing. Fear of getting HIV/AIDS or other sexually transmitted diseases is effective in getting people to avoid unsafe sex or to use a condom. Strong fear appeals have been associated across a number of studies with greater persuasion and more compliance. But fear is uncomfortable. It can be controlled by either danger avoidance, not getting a sunburn or not having unsafe sex, or by message avoidance. People do not pay close attention to, process, or recall fearful messages. Worse, if a fear appeal does not result in any consequences, then the message is additionally ineffective. So here is the other side of the fear sword that cuts both ways. Fear appeals can cause decreased attention to messages and can result in less compliance with warnings against risky behavior. This is the reason some studies show that moderate fear appeals work better than strong fear appeals. They are more likely to result in listening and mental processing. Any campaign to reduce disease, violence, or to improve health can use fear appeals, but here are some guidelines for their effective use. Fear appeals should come from a very high credibility source, someone who has received respect, trust, and is thought of as an expert. Low credibility sources result in low compliance and sometimes behavior change in the opposite direction intended. Fear appeals that employ humor or attract interest are most likely to be viewed and remembered, and less likely to be forgotten. Moderate fear appeals are often sufficient to get the point across, and less likely to be avoided or forgotten. Remember, some strong fear appeals result in message avoidance rather than risk avoidance. Make fear appeals realistic, getting people to change their behavior to avoid hypothetical or non-existent threats makes them more resistant to the next message. Make sure people have the ability to do what you suggest. Complete dietary changes, using a form of birth control banned by their religion, or investing in an armored car are totally unrealistic. On the other hand, having a first aid kit, wearing sunscreen, or avoiding unsafe sex is something most people can do. Speaking of safety, it is important that workplaces be prepared as well. Make sure your business, agency, or institution has a workplace safety program that includes safety prevention, an evacuation plan, and a public relationships plan that admits responsibility for actions. When Tylenol was tainted in an evil campaign, Johnson & Johnson was forthcoming, made reparations, improved seals on their bottles, and reassured the public. Today, Johnson & Johnson is both highly profitable and regarded as one of the most consumer-oriented and environmentally friendly companies in the world. Other companies that tried to cover up their problems with their cars that roll over, tires that blow out, or chemicals that pollute cities have not fared as well. One solution to an increasingly insecure and dangerous world is networked collaboration through interactive satellite or ISDN lines, video conferences, the internet, and on new systems that represent the convergence of telecommunication, computer applications, engineering, and wireless communication. With the support of competent and trained distance activity coordinators, these systems can be quite effective for virtual meetings and dialogues, negotiation, legal depositions, education and training, eliminating the need for long flights or driving, or having to travel to high-risk areas. Network applications are being developed throughout the world and are used in business, industry, education, art, medicine, science, and engineering. These virtual meeting places, classrooms, design centers, and engineering projects are relatively inexpensive compared to the time and money spent on travel. Craig Samuel, Hewlett-Packard's Chief Knowledge Officer, according to an article in PC Magazine, is a great believer in the potential of networked collaboration. He believes that the unchecked flood of spam and the existence of online alternatives, he says, means that the age of email has reached its summit and is in decline. Important work will move to other collaborative spaces. Systems like Microsoft's SharePoint and Groove Network's peer-to-peer software for sharing work among distributed teams enable secure, real-time collaboration without corporate firewalls or noise from unwanted messages. At the Center for Network Systems, CNS, of the Jacobs School of Engineering at the University of California, San Diego, 4 technology leaders, Qualcomm, AT&T, Alcatel, and Hewlett-Packard, are collaborating to develop technologies for robust, secure, and open network systems. Networks and systems have converged, becoming complex systems in their own right. New systems are being created that are secure, worm and virus proof, and yet enable multi-user distributed work teams to collaborate on projects. Of course, there's always the need for face-to-face interpersonal collaboration that is best suited for building long-lasting relationships. After all, the most multisensory, realistic, interactive, vivid environment with the greatest sense of presence is good old face-to-face communication. Risk and security will be increasingly the most important consideration for successful organizations and communities in the coming years. Service excellence and productivity are only a myth without secure and safe working environments. And without stable communities and markets capable of managing their inherent risk and contingencies with the latest technology and networking resources we have today. Thank you.